Week 2 was a complete 180 from week 1. Some of those guys that were duds in week 1 were stars in week 2. Some of those guys that were stars in week 1 were actually duds in week 2. We'll talk about it all, including all the injuries. But starting off with this Ravens game, looking at Baltimore here, this was a decent Lamar Jackson performance in terms of a fantasy football skill set. Obviously, when you get to 45 rushing yards, it doesn't matter. You only have one passing touchdown. It just raises the floor overall. Lamar continues to be an elite quarterback going into the future. Nothing changes. Now, going over to running back, I thought this was about to be a massive Derrick Henry blow-up game. I mean, the Ravens were favored by 9 points going into this contest. You had an implied team total with only 16 points for this Raiders offense. Obviously, the Raiders crushed, which we'll talk about in 1 second. But what's very interesting is if you look at the underlying usage for the running backs here in Baltimore, if we're looking at the PFF snap data, you actually have 30 snaps played from Derrick Henry, 35 snaps played for Justice Hill. Now, of course, Derrick Henry has the vast majority of the work. Derrick Henry, 18 carries in comparison to Justice Hill at 4. If you're looking at the receiving usage, Justice Hill, 2 targets in comparison to Derrick Henry at 1 target. But yeah, Derrick Henry still continues not to be the 3-down back that you drafted him to be. This offense still looks a little bit disappointing. And yeah, I mean, I will reiterate, Derrick Henry turned 31 in January. He's declined for 3 straight seasons. He's not going to catch the ball. Not a running back 1 in fantasy. Now, going over to the pass catchers here, I mean, based off the week 1 usage that you had of Isaiah Likely, I immediately threw Isaiah Likely in as a top 12 tight end in our rankings. Now, obviously, we'll talk about all the tight ends this week. I don't necessarily think that looks that bad with how bad all these tight ends were. But yeah, Isaiah Likely comes out and he only gives you 3 targets, 2 receptions, 26 receiving yards. If you look at the underlying snaps and routes run, Isaiah Likely ran 18 out of 37 potential routes here. So Isaiah Likely was pretty much a part-time player. Andrews wasn't that much better. Andrews ran 28 routes out of 37. The guy that had everything was actually Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers ran a route on every single Lamar Jackson dropback. Zay Flowers had 11 targets in this offense. And going into the future, I don't necessarily think things change here. I don't think Zay Flowers is some top 12 wide receiver by any means. But I do think that Flowers is probably a wide receiver that you continue to start as that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. But if he is going to have this type of target volume and Likely Andrews are just going to eat into each other, maybe Andrews and Likely aren't nearly as exciting as what you would have assumed coming out of week 1. Now, going over to the Raiders side of things, this is what was shocking. So sportsbooks were coming into the week telling us that the Raiders offense was going to be the worst offense in the NFL. They had an implied team total of 16 points. And yes, Gardner Minshew said, F you, I don't care. Gardner Minshew off of 38 pass attempts, 276 passing yards, funnels everything to the top 2 options. Everything in this offense looks to be extremely concentrated between Davante Adams and Brock Bowers. Adams has 12 targets. Brock Bowers has 9 targets that accounted for 23 of the 38 pass attempts for Gardner Minshew here. And yes, I mean, this is a situation in which now I have to look at my tight end rankings and go, how many tight ends do I possibly rank over Brock Bowers? As we go ahead and look at this from Dwayne McFarland, 2 games, Brock Bowers is averaging 15.3 fantasy points per contest. He's running a route on 71% of Gardner Minshew dropbacks. He's had 25% of the targets in this offense, 26% of the air yards. So if we just naturally assume that the rookie tight end is going to continue to expand his role and maybe gets up to 80% of the routes in this offense, Brock Bowers looks like a locked and loaded top 5 tight end. Obviously, he was an elite level prospect. I wish that I drafted way less Sam Laporta and way more Brock Bowers. I mean, I have Laporta in the flock league and it almost crushed me this week. We snuck by, hopefully with the win. We'll talk about it later. But yeah, Adams, if you have this type of game from Gardner Minshew where he has 38 pass attempts, Adams crushes. The running backs here, neither of them are interesting. I mean, yes, you have a little bit more of a Zamir White game. Zamir White plays 31 snaps on early downs in comparison to 5 snaps for Alexander Mattison. Obviously, Alexander Mattison still has the usage on 3rd down, but you actually saw Zamir White and Amir Abdullah split the 2-minute drill. So it looks like maybe this is trending towards the Zamir White. Honestly, it doesn't matter. The running backs here are so bad. This offense is going to be bad going into the future. You're not starting any of the backs. Alexander Mattison actually had the rushing touchdown, but it's not like you're sitting here super excited about Alexander Mattison, a running back that had 0 receptions, 4 carries, 1 rushing yard, and that was for the touchdown. So nobody is viable at running back in Las Vegas. Now going over to the Browns game. Yes, I know everybody wanted to scream at me, oh my gosh, Mason, you traded away Amari Cooper, the god. Amari Cooper's Amari Cooper, 3 receptions, 11 receiving yards. Thank God he was not on my team. That's the reason I won this week. But anyway, if you look at the passing volume here, yet another week where Deshaun Watson does not have any passing volume. Off of 34 pass attempts, 186 passing yards. Yet another week where it looks like no pass catchers in Cleveland are viable. And going over to the running back situation, this is now a spot where it's difficult to know if Jerome Ford is somebody that we can consistently rely upon. If you look at the underlying snaps played, you actually had 27 snaps for Deonta Foreman and 32 snaps for Jerome Ford. So if all of a sudden Ford is splitting this backfield in a bad offense where it doesn't appear that Ford is some top end talent, you probably need to, I don't want to say bench Ford, but definitely view him in a different light where he's not an automatic starter for us. Now going over to the Jacksonville Jaguars, with Jacksonville, you have, only 220 passing yards for Lawrence off of 30 pass attempts. This is yet again, just another low volume passing offense. Passing this year so far has just been a train wreck in the NFL. ETN actually looks like it's going to be crushing going into the future. You actually had a Tank Bigsby injury in this game. So looking at the underlying snap usage with ETN at 43 snaps in comparison to Dearness Johnson at 17, maybe this is something we can expect going into the future with Tank Bigsby no longer being a viable option. And I don't want to say this for sure, but it looks like Christian Kirk may end up being a wide receiver that is just unstartable. I wasn't interested in Kirk in drafts this year. I wasn't interested in him after week 1. But once Evan Ingram was ruled out of this game, I went, okay, no Evan Ingram. I guess Christian Kirk's going to soak up some of those targets close. No, Christian Kirk does absolutely nothing. He has -1 receiving yards this week. Kirk looks washed. He didn't have much upside in the first place. Britton Strange may end up being a waiver wire pickup at this point. 6 targets. Obviously, we're going to have to monitor the hamstring with Evan Ingram. But Brian Thomas Jr., for sure the wide receiver 1 in this offense going into the future. With Thomas, yes, he only played 44 snaps in comparison to 60 potential, but he had 30 routes run in comparison to Gabe Davis only at 34. So he is pretty much running a route on every single Lawrence drop back. And yes, he leads the team with receiving 94 receiving yards, by far and away the best big play option for this offense and has the most upside. Now going over to an offense that has no passing volume whatsoever, the Los Angeles Chargers, another week with only 130 passing yards for Justin Herbert. Now, thank God for my Underdog best ball teams. The big Q, shout out those people who hung out with us in the live streams every single day this offseason, comes through 2 receiving touchdowns, 5 receptions, 51 receiving yards. Love it. Could not be happier. Now, am I going to tell you to start Quentin Johnston in your regular redraft league this night? No. It looks like really none of these Los Angeles Chargers receivers are going to be exciting because, yet again, 20 pass attempts, 130 passing yards for Justin Herbert. This is a team that wants to play good defense, run the football, and win games that way. You look over and take a peek at J.K. Dobbins. He still splits with Gus Edwards, pretty much snaps down the middle with 32 and 33, but it just simply does not matter. J.K. Dobbins is the electric back here. We can assume that J.K. Dobbins, who continuously proves to be a better option over Gus Edwards from week-to-week perspective, expands his role. Dobbins had the 131 rushing yards. Dobbins had the rushing touchdown. Yes, he only had 1 reception for 0 receiving yards, so the receiving volume wasn't there. Dobbins did play 5 snaps on 3rd down out of a potential 9. So it does look like Dobbins is still probably going to be the 3rd down back. And Dobbins maybe turns into kind of an every week starter here. Now going over to the Carolina, abandoned ship, cut everybody. Literally, if you have Deontay Johnson, cut him just to send a message to the rest of your team. This is an absolute garbage offense. Nobody is trustworthy. I know everybody thought Dave Canales was going to come in and save Bryce Young. Does not look like that's the case. You go ahead. Bryce Young doesn't throw a ball, further than 15 yards down the field. Bryce Young, pretty much every single completion that he had was either at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. It was horrendous. It was disgusting. Bryce Young looks like he is the worst quarterback in the NFL right now. You had 26 pass attempts for 84 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, and the interception. Looking at the running back usage, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders split. So, yeah, you can't even start Chuba Hubbard. Nobody is startable in this offense. It's disgusting, and there's nothing to even talk about. The only guy even worth the roster spot maybe at this point, and I mean maybe, is Deontay Johnson, where Deontay does lead the team in targets with 6. Now, going over to Washington. So I had Terry McLaurin in my second flex spot this week. was really hoping for a McLaurin blow up, but the issue is Jaden Daniels didn't throw the ball deep downfield in week 1, and that continues to happen in week 2. Jaden Daniels, 5.2 yard average depth target is the lowest in the NFL through 2 weeks of games. Everything's close to the line of scrimmage. Zach Ertz leads the team in overall receiving yards with 62. After that, Austin Eckler has 47 receiving yards. Brian Robinson Jr. has 3 targets out of this backfield. Terry McLaurin has 8 targets, but unlike Terry McLaurin fashion, Terry McLaurin gives you 3 receptions for 47 receiving yards off of this. Going over to the running back usage, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler kind of split. You actually have 20 routes run for Brian Robinson, so it's not like Austin Eckler is getting absolutely everything on third down. I know Brian Robinson had the 133 rushing yards this week, but since Brian Robinson's not going to have a ton of production as a receiver, and Jaden Daniels will steal some of these rushing touchdowns, I don't think Brian Robinson turns into some must-start guy. He's in a committee backfield, kind of competing with 2 other running backs in Jaden Daniels and Austin Eckler. And yeah, Daniels consistently just checking the ball down, does elevate the floor with the rushing upside, but I don't think you can rank him in the tier of guys like Kyler Murray just yet, who obviously can have the passing volume and the rushing upside at the same time. Now, staying in this division, obviously, we're very excited about the Philadelphia Eagles playing on Monday night. And if you're going to want to have some fun watching the game, highly recommend taking advantage of the offer over on Underdog Fantasy. Any new first-time depositors on Underdog are going to get a Jalen Hurts free pick, more than less than half a total yard for Monday night. Plus, if you use code FLOCK, you're going to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And with code FLOCK, you are actually going to be getting an additional free team review over there on flockfantasy.com during one of these live streams. Highly recommend you taking advantage of that in the description and comment section. And Monday, they may or may not be dropping 20% profit boost tokens as well, which you know your boy will be in on. Now, going over to the Giants offense. So Daniel Jones took some heat off his back this week and kind of just pointed that blame as the league's worst quarterback over to Bryce Young. And how did he do this? How did Daniel Jones look competent? 1, it was a very good matchup going up against the Washington Commanders. And 2, he went Malik Neighbors, save me. Save my career, save my job. This was insane. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this from a rookie wide receiver. Almost any wide receiver in the NFL. You have 28 Daniel Jones pass attempts. 18 targets for Malik Neighbors. 18. We saw this type of market share in week 1. That's why we had Malik Neighbors as that buy low candidate after the Daniel Jones blow up in week 1. The issue is, while Malik Neighbors is going to continue to dominate market share numbers, you are capped in this offense. If you look at Daniel Jones, I know he is a very bad NFL quarterback, but he may be better than the backup options that you actually have here. And what we had from Adam Schefter this morning was him pointing out that the injury guarantees for Daniel Jones in 2025 may lead to a situation where Daniel Jones gets benched prematurely just so the Giants don't have to pay him any additional guarantees if he were to get injured. This is what happened to Russell Wilson in 2023. It looks like the same thing may happen to Daniel Jones in 2024. Definitely not a good spot in terms of them losing this week somehow, despite the fact that they score 3 touchdowns and the Commanders don't score any. Going over to the Giants running backs, Devin Singletary continues to be the 3-down back here. Devin Singletary is 44 out of potential 56 snaps. Daniel Jones has 5 carries in comparison to Devin Singletary, but Singletary is 16 carries in comparison to Tyrone Tracy. So Singletary is the 3-down back here. Still not excited to start him because you have no role as a receiver, and it is one of the league's worst offenses. Now, going over to Seattle, this was probably the most surprising game of the week. Obviously, you have no Kenneth Walker, so I immediately go, oh my gosh, Zach Charbonnet has the size to be a 3-down player. He can catch the ball to the backfield. He'll have the red zone role. Start Charbonnet, start Charbonnet, start Charbonnet. We kind of get lucky with the rushing touchdown, get lucky with the 8.1 receiving points as well. But what ends up happening is the Seattle Seahawks completely abandon the run. They go, okay, yeah, no Kenneth Walker. Let's have 49 Geno Smith dropbacks. 49. And what is also crazy here is after Tyler Lockett leads this team in receiving week 1, I was sitting here going, okay, I can't trust JSN. I can't start JSN until we actually see him produce on the football field. And immediately after that, Jackson Smith and Jigba leads this team with 16 targets, 12 receptions, 117 receiving yards. Obviously, DK Metcalf has the big play. DK Metcalf also absolutely crushes. 10 receptions, 129 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. You have 30 total targets between JSN and DK Metcalf out of a potential 44 Geno Smith pass attempts. It's nuts if the concentration of targets is this extreme going into the future. Both DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba will be must-start options every single week. I'm very sorry if I told you to bench JSN this week. Now you know. Hell, we can put him in the lineup in week 3. This is the best game of his NFL career. And yeah, I think you should be very excited. Now, going over to the Pats, we continue to have Ramondre Stevenson as a sell-high candidate, and he continues to be one of the only reasons I'm winning matchups in the Flock League. Ramondre Stevenson comes through with the rushing touchdown. He has 21 carries in this offense. Now, honestly, I'm not super inspired going into the future because I still stand by. I think this is a bad New England Patriots offense. Antonio Gibson is going to have a role here. Antonio Gibson had 11 carries in this game in comparison to Ramondre Stevenson at 21. Gibson was the more efficient running back at the same time. If you look at the usage as receivers, it is nice to see Ramondre had 5 targets out of the backfield, but this was an offense that just kind of shut it down and went, we are going to run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. I mean, it was an insane game where all Seattle did was throw, all New England did was run. You had 36 rush attempts for the New England Patriots offense in comparison to 27 pass attempts. So Ramondre got there for us. I don't know how excited we can be going into the future. Like we said, it's just a horrendous offense. Going over to the Vikings. The Vikings, I thought we were about to have a Justin Jefferson nuclear game. 97-yard receiving touchdown for Jefferson immediately. Thank God, because my matchup traded away Justin Jefferson earlier this week. So now I'm able to make fun of him relentlessly, and I didn't have to go up against Jefferson. But Jefferson, now dealing with the quad injury, definitely could have been a lot worse. I mean, I don't have any official news on how much time Jefferson's going to be missing just yet, but it is very simple with Justin Jefferson. It's black and white. If Jefferson plays, he's in your lineup. If Jefferson misses, no other receiver here in Minnesota is interesting. I know Jalen Naylor comes out. He has 54 receiving yards in the receiving touchdown, but the issue is Jordan Addison may be healthy in week 3. So even if Jefferson were to miss a couple of games, then I think Addison actually steps in as the number 1 receiver here. Aaron Jones was that sell-high candidate for us based off the assumption that this offense was going to be getting worse. And at the same time, looking at the split with Ty Chandler, this was a situation where Chandler is going to take a considerable amount of touches. Chandler leads the team with 82 rushing yards, but Aaron Jones is still the most valuable guy here from a fantasy perspective because Aaron Jones does have every single target out of the backfield with 6 targets, 5 receptions, and 36 receiving yards. So yeah, like we said, Aaron Jones, don't have super high expectations because it's going to be a very bad offense, but the PPR floor he gives you is decent. Now the Niners, what I am I don't want to say surprised to see, it's just crazy that Shanahan goes, oh, Jordan Mason, you look good last week. Let's give Jordan Mason 57 snaps and let's give Isaac Guerendo 1. Jordan Mason plays every single snap here at running back for the Niners, continues to be that low-end RB1, high-end RB2, and I will continue to say it, and you'll continue to scream at me in the comment section, but Jordan Mason, what keeps him away from being that high-end RB1 in fantasy as he doesn't have the receiving role. I know you're going to scream at me, oh my God, Mason, he worked on it in the offseason. I read a report. I heard him on the TV say it. He may have worked on it, but yet again, another game with 1 target out of the backfield for 4 receiving yards. So Mason, still low-end, running back 1, high-end RB2, but I think in a full PPR format, you can't put him as that top 5 back just because of the limited usage as a receiver. But yet again, we see Deebo Samuel continue to have just that additional usage in games where CMC is out. If you look at the splits with and without CMC for Deebo Samuel over the past few years, Deebo is that top borderline 5 receiver with no McCaffrey in this offense. 8 receptions, 110 receiving yards. Kittle crushes, deals with some camps, gets carted away. Looked a lot scarier than it sounds like it is now. Brandon Ayuk continues to disappoint. I think you just have to give Brandon Ayuk a little bit more time. Missed a ton of time during training camp. I'm really not too concerned about Ayuk here. Going over to Tennessee, I have to take my L where we have it. Tony Pollard was that sell-high candidate for us. Tajee Spears goes down, and now Pollard looks like he's a true 3-down workhorse back. Pollard has 6 targets out of this backfield. Pollard has 5 receptions, 40 receiving yards. It looks like Spears may not have to be someone you're worried about stealing that Pollard receiving volume dependent on the Spears injury. Pollard also at the same time has 62 rushing yards. Now, of course, it's a team that is just not a good offense in general. Calvin Ridley gets there with 2 total touchdowns, which is very surprising based off how tough this matchup was going up against the Jets. And if you look at this graph from Nathan Jakey, the PFF team, you actually see that DeAndre Hopkins still very low in terms of his snap percentage, despite this coaching staff coming out and saying that DeAndre Hopkins was going to have a larger role in week 2. By larger role, that meant, he's going to play 25% of the snaps, to now he's going to play maybe 45%. Still not close to being able to start DeAndre Hopkins in fantasy. Going over to the Jets side of things, Braylon Allen comes out, and Braylon Allen maybe shows that Breece Hall is not the running back 1 overall in fantasy. Breece Hall isn't going to see 90+% of this backfield every single week. And instead, maybe Bijan Robinson should be our running back 1 overall. Obviously, still Breece Hall is an elite option. He's arguably one of, if not the best receiving backs in the league. You had 8 targets out of the backfield for Breece Hall this week, 7 receptions, 52 receiving yards. If you go ahead and look at this tweet from Dwayne McFarland, through 2 games, Garrett Wilson, 100% route participation, 29% of this team's targets, 45% of the air yards. We had Wilson as a buy low candidate week 1. I think he's even more of an appealing buy low candidate this week. Going and looking at what we had from Allen Lazard versus Mike Williams, you got the report going into this game that Mike Williams was on that snap count where he was only limited to 15 snaps week 1. Week 2, they were going to begin to implement him a little bit more. That's exactly what happens. Mike Williams plays 37 snaps, and now Allen Lazard is only down to running 26 out of 33 routes in this offense. So Allen Lazard, definitely not somebody that you can consistently rely upon. Looks like Mike Williams is stepping up just a bit. Am I excited to start either one of these guys? No. It's very simple. You start Wilson, you start Hall, you definitely roster Braylon Allen as that premium handcuff back. And then between Mike Williams, Allen Lazard, if you wanted to roster them on the bottom end of your team, you can do just that, but very hard to rely upon them from a week-to-week perspective. Now, going over to the Colts, bravo, Anthony Richardson. Bravo, my friend. You jump from 9 completions to 17 completions this week. At this rate, Anthony Richardson is going to crush week. Obviously, horrible passing game for him, A-Rich. A-Rich gives you 3 interceptions to 1 passing touchdown off of 34 pass attempts. With A-Rich, it's the deep ball or nothing. You saw that with his hot graph week 1. Week 2, the issue is just those easy dumps to Michael Pittman Jr. simply are not there. Pittman's tied with Alec Pierce in terms of total targets in this offense, where Alec Pierce actually has 7 targets. Pittman has 7 targets. Pierce, yet again, leads the team in receiving, both with receptions, yards, and touchdowns. So I know maybe this is going to have everybody going out going, I need Alec Pierce. I need Alec Pierce. I don't know. It is tough for me. I think there's that outside chance that Adonai Mitchell does expand his role as the season goes on here. Now, one thing that I need to figure out why this happened is Jonathan Taylor did not play every snap in this offense. If you're looking at week 1, Jonathan Taylor literally had 100% of the touches compared to Trey Sermon at 0, compared to Tyler Goodson at 0. I have no idea what happened here. I don't know why the snap rate dropped the way that it did for JT. At the same time, he did have 103 rushing yards. Trey Sermon had 2 carries for 0 rushing yards. Taylor had 4 targets out of the backfield. So Taylor has himself a fine day if you're just looking at the box score, but the underlying usage is a little weird that now some of these secondary running backs are getting involved where they weren't previously. Now, going over to the Packers, I'm sorry if I told you to bench Dontavian Wicks. Our hard rule that we told everybody this week in videos in the live stream is if you looked at the underdog pick'ems, Malik Willis was like higher, lower, 168 passing yards. I thought this was going to be the worst passing offense in the NFL this week. Thanks, Carolina, for proving me wrong. But nonetheless, there's just no reason to start any pass catcher in Green Bay with Malik Willis under center. With Malik Willis under center, they go, okay, we know we cannot throw the ball. They had 14 pass attempts in comparison to 53 rush attempts. I don't even want to dive into like the snaps for Josh Jacobs, where yes, Jacobs plays like 47 snaps. Emmanuel Wilson and Marshawn Lloyd both have a role here. It doesn't freaking matter. I mean, if Jacobs has 32 carries, you have to give the man a break. He has to come off the field somewhat. Jacobs is a true 3-down workhorse. Looking at Reed, looking at Wicks, looking at Dobbs, looking at Christian Watson, I do want to reiterate, none of these guys are startable with Malik Willis under center. I don't even think it's useful to look at the targets that they have in this offense because this team is just going to be so different when they have a real quarterback under center with Jordan Love, which hopefully we are getting in week 5. Now, let's go ahead and let's move over to the Detroit Lions. Looking at Detroit, I owe everybody an apology. This was an offense that Vegas had with the highest implied team total of any team this week at 29 points. I thought every single player in this offense was a start. And that led me to starting a ton of Sam Laporta. I have Sam Laporta in the Flock League. Obviously, I have a bunch of underdog drafts. But anytime I ever got a question, Sam Laporta, he was still my tight end one this week. Obviously, a massive whiff. Laporta only has 3 targets off of 53 Jared Goff pass attempts. I am extremely concerned with this. Sam Laporta was my tight end one. I don't know how I can have him there anymore. I think at this point, I have to move Laporta at minimum behind Trey McBride. We'll talk about the Cardinals in just one bit. St. Brown gets banged up. St. Brown freaking 19 targets in this game, 119 receiving yards, 11 receptions. Obviously, we'll monitor the St. Brown injury, but when healthy, he looks like he is just going to be absolutely crushing. Jamison Williams, if you look at this chart from PFF, actually plays the highest snap rate we pretty much have ever seen from Jamison. He runs 53 routes, the same amount as Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has 11 targets in this offense as well. Now, obviously, 11 targets isn't as impressive when you have 55 Jared Goff pass attempts, but still, I mean, definitely looks like he is somebody that we can rely upon. Montgomery has 4 targets out of the backfield. Jahmyr Gibbs, just PPR machine with 7 receptions for 22 receiving yards. So the volume's there in Detroit. The issue is the touchdowns aren't, which has capped the overall ceiling of the offense. And I'm freaking getting crushed with Sam Laporta right now. But I do stand by. I think St. Brown, Montgomery, Gibbs, Laporta are all must-start guys going into the future based off the passing volume you should have. Hopefully Jared Goff throws some touchdowns sometime soon, but it was just a tough game in general. Now, going over to what we have at running back for the Bucs. This is going to be the main story here. So Rachaad White dealt with the groin injury. Rachaad White was out of the game, but he still ends up playing 34 snaps and seeing the vast majority of work in this backfield. So it's not like we can say, oh, okay, it was just the injury for Rachaad White. He's going to be the same. No. Bucky Irving, yet again, is the more efficient back, leads the team in rushing outside of Baker Mayfield, of course. Baker coming out and crushing it. Rachaad White doesn't see the normal amount of target volume that you would expect, at least based off what we've historically had here. So I don't know if you can rank Rachaad White as just that must-start running back going into the future anymore. It looks like Bucky Irving is expanding his role. Rachaad White for sure going to be a running back that is falling down my rankings. Now, if you look at Chris Godwin, obviously a ton of people were excited about him moving over to the slot with the change in offensive coordinators here in Tampa. Godwin actually does see 8 targets, leads the team in targets this week, also has 117 receiving yards, receiving touchdown. It's very clear. Chris Godwin on the outside, kind of whatever receiver. Chris Godwin in the slot getting usage. Phenomenal must-start option in fantasy. Evans must-start option in fantasy. You had 14 targets between Godwin and Evans off of only 19 Baker Mayfield pass attempts. Ridiculous target share, and this is a ridiculous offense in terms of the concentration between these two guys. Now, going over to the Dallas Cowboys. This is a very difficult game to come out and evaluate. Because if you go ahead and look at the score right away, and I mean right away, the Saints jump out. Saints 14-0. Then by the time you get to half, I mean, the Saints are sitting here with 35 points in comparison to Dallas at 16. So I almost don't even like looking at the running back usage. If you look at it, I mean, it's kind of split all over the place. This graph from PFF for this chart, you see, yes, Rico Dowdle had 5 snaps compared to 1 in the short yardage area with Ezekiel Elliott. They kind of split early downs, kind of split the 2-minute drill, but everything is so skewed because this wasn't a real football game. Lamb obviously looks very good. What's surprising is Jalen Tolbert does see 9 targets in comparison to Brandon Cooks at 2. Brandon Cooks runs 37 routes, the same amount as CeeDee Lamb, but it does look like Brandon Cooks probably not somebody that you can rely upon. And we will talk about Jalen Tolbert just a little bit more in the waiver wire video that comes out tomorrow. So just make sure you are subscribed. Now, going over to the Saints, back-to-back situations here in which it's very difficult to take a ton away. The Saints win week 1, 47-10. They win week 2, 44-19. If you were looking at the passing volume that you had in both these weeks, Week 1, Derek Carr, 23 pass attempts. Week 2, Derek Carr, 16 pass attempts. So when we look at the usage for the receivers in this offense, what am I supposed to say? There's not much. When you only have, say, 16 pass attempts in an offense because it's not a real football game, I mean, obviously Olave's not going to be sitting here with 12 targets in the game. Olave does have 6. He does look good. He has 81 receiving yards, which is about a third of this offense. Really, the only players that touch the ball here are Shaheed Olave and Alvin Kamara. This chart from PFF will show you that Juwan Johnson, you can just go ahead and cut. But the main storyline here, of course, is Alvin Kamara just going nuclear. Alvin Kamara looks like he is not washed in the slightest. I had Kamara previously on flockfantasy.com ranked as a low-end RB1 / high-end RB2. And at this point, especially in a full PPR formats, it does look like Alvin Kamara turns into a mid RB1 in fantasy. The Saints look like they're for realsies. Kamara, obviously, we know is going to have the receiving usage. So I don't know. It's just embarrassing how low I had Kamara ranked, to be completely honest with you. Like, I am embarrassed. Now, going over to a game that I watched from the second it started to the second it ended, and I may or may not have screamed, and I mean screamed at the screen 5+ times regarding Jamar Chase, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, let me vent to you real quick. We'll talk about the overall usage trend with these players, but let's go over to Jamar Chase. Here is what happened at tight end in Cincinnati. Mike Gesicki, 9 targets, 91 receiving yards. Eric All Jr., a player that I have never heard of, 4 targets, 32 receiving yards. Drew Sample, 3 targets, 28 receiving yards. You're sitting here with almost 150 passing yards, specifically just to the tight end position. Jamar Chase, at the very end of the game, picks up some cheap receptions that hopefully pushed us over the edge in week 2 to end up wrapping this up Monday night. Chase gives you 5 targets for 4 receptions, 35 receiving yards. He never looked like he was in the game. Maybe I'm overreacting because I was relying on, and maybe I am just being a little too emotional here, but he looked like a decoy that wasn't really even into it either, where you would see that like, oh, it's a running play. The ball gets snapped. Jamar Chase just stands there. He was like, oh, I'm not getting the ball. I'm chilling. Looks like he doesn't give a damn. Looks like he's pissed that he didn't get paid. You don't deserve to get paid after this. I mean, hell, I'm thinking about throwing you on the trade block, just send a message to the rest of my fantasy team. But yeah, hopefully when Higgins comes in, it's more of a scheme thing, and hopefully Chase can see more separation and less defensive attention, as obviously the game plan for the Bengals appear to be use Chase as a decoy, funnel targets to kind of the crappy options if they're open. Going over to what you had at running back, Chase Brown looked more dynamic pretty much in every instance that he touched the football than Zach Moss. But Zach Moss still does appear to be the guy over Chase Brown from a usage perspective. Now, going over to KC, Rashee Rice actually sees the 44-yard receiving touchdown. So it's not like Rashee Rice is in a spot where all of a sudden he's just slant guy. No, he's actually running routes deep downfield. Xavier Worthy obviously was that player that couldn't really rely upon coming out of week 2. He only had 3 targets. This week, he only has 4 targets. I'm very sorry. I'm still going to probably have Xavier Worthy as someone that you can't just automatically jam into your starting lineup. I think you have to see a week where he has a decent target share before you do just that. But maybe we actually have more passing volume in the Chiefs offense going forward. Because while everything was just, play the keep away, everything was just, oh, let's play it safe. You had 32 rush attempts in comparison to 25 pass attempts in this offense. Pacheco goes down at the end of the game. Now, the initial report that we are looking at is Isaiah Pacheco leaving the stadium on crutches in a walking boot. So if Pacheco does miss time here, obviously this is a situation in which you would assume that Carson Steele steps in, sees the majority of this offense, but at the same time, it's not necessarily a very easy call because they have Samaje Perine, and it does appear that Samaje Perine, more likely than not, would actually be the running back that is being used on third downs. So I don't know. Obviously, we'll talk about Carson Steele in the waiver wire video that will come out tomorrow. Now, going over to the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this was a stressful game for me. I had Connor going. Nathan had Kyler and Kyron Williams. And immediately, right out the gate, Kyler Murray puts this game away. This game was over by halftime. I mean, this game was maybe over before halftime. If you were going through and checking this out, 14-0 Arizona after the first quarter. 24-3 at halftime for the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr. bombs. While only 4 receptions for Harrison, he does have 8 targets out of 21 pass attempts for Kyler Murray. Dominates the target share, 130 receiving yards, multiple receiving touchdowns. And this is what we talked about. We said after week 1, if you drafted a rookie wide receiver in round 1 or round 2, just to panic and sell him after a slow start week 1, why the hell did you draft him in the first place? You've got to be more patient with these rookies. Harrison was a must-start guy this week. He's a must-start guy next week. He's definitely going to be higher in my rankings next week. This week we had him as that mid-tight wide receiver 2. Now he's probably going to be a low-end wide receiver 1 in our rankings this next week. Kyler Murray looks phenomenal. James Conner absolutely dominates the usage here. Now I will say, don't read too much into the snap data, because if you are looking at the snaps, I mean, you had Trey Benson, you had DeMarcado, you had these guys in at the end of the game when it was already a blowout. Same thing on the Los Angeles Rams side of things. You have the Cooper Kupp injury. So obviously with the Kupp injury, all of a sudden the Rams have no way to move the ball down the football field. You have no Kupp. You have no Puka Nacua. So what could the Rams possibly do? Kyron Williams, extremely inefficient. I think Kyron has no shot in this offense. Like, what is Kyler supposed to do when clearly this team, their only option is to run the ball into stacked boxes? Kyler Murray gives you a rushing touchdown. He has some usage as a receiver here, but it's very scary. I think if you have no Kupp and no Puka for this Rams team, this could go downhill really quick. I don't know how much time Kupp's going to be missing, but say that Kupp misses a month, or say he misses a couple weeks. I have no idea. But if Kupp misses a couple weeks and the Rams fall to 0-4, they fall to 0-5. It's going to be a really scary situation. Like, the Rams go up against the Niners, then the Bears, then the Packers. Like, very easily, the Rams could be 1-4 through the first 5 weeks. And at that point, you're not rushing Kupp back. You're not rushing Puka back. Now, going over to the Steelers, we actually learned that Justin Fields is not going to have the same rushing upside that he did in Chicago. Now, this is back-to-back games where Fields has been limited as a rusher, where this week, yes, they're pretty much winning the game from start to finish. Fields can be a little more conservative, but he still only has 27 total rushing yards. And we know if Fields' the passing volume is not going to be there, you won't be able to start him in fantasy if the rushing isn't. Going over to the running backs, Najee Harris actually does see some of this job go to Jaylen Warren. This was the expectation as Jaylen Warren got healthier, being another week removed from the hamstring injury. Jaylen Warren actually did go out and play 31 snaps in comparison to Najee Harris at 31. So this is back to being a 50-50 split backfield where really neither running back is that exciting. Looking at George Pickens, Pickens is just... none of these guys are startable if Fields going to come out and he's going to have 117 passing yards per game. I mean, you go and look at Darnell Washington with the receiving touchdown. You look at this graph by PFF and see the Freiermuth usage going down with Arthur Smith coming in. It's all very concerning, and no Steeler really looks startable at the moment. And going over to Denver, same situation. The Broncos are doing their best Panthers impersonation, where yes, you have 246 passing yards from Bo Nix, but still at the same time, no Broncos receiver can be relied upon. I mean, Greg Dulcich actually leads his team with 8 targets. Maybe it's an interesting waiver wire pickup. But I mean, even Cortland Sutton comes away with 4 targets, even though he ran a route on pretty much every single Bo Nix dropback. Looking at the running back situation in Denver, really this is the only thing that is maybe encouraging, where you do have 40 snaps for Javonte Williams out of a potential 61. And Javonte does see the vast majority of touches out of this backfield as well, with 11 carries and 5 receptions. So if anybody had the shot to be viable in Denver, it would be Javonte. But what you would need is you would need this offense to just be dramatically better, which honestly, it may be if we get better matchups for Bo Nix going forward. Now, I think that should be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe if you play fantasy football. I want to give a shout out, of course, to Nathan Janke and the PFF team for, putting out all this snap data, all these charts. They're phenomenal. It's crazy how fast they get this stuff out. And of course, if you wanted to take advantage of that Jalen Hurts free pick on Underdog during Monday Night Football, use promo code FLOCK with the link in the description and comment section. Code FLOCK will also get you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. It will get you a free team review during a live stream from yours truly through flockfantasy.com. And on top of that, you're going to be getting those profit boost tokens for Monday as well, which your boy will be taking advantage of. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. And I really hope that I get to see you out with the video tomorrow morning.